Hello everyone, and welcome back to Little Nightmare. I'm Michael, and before we begin, I'd like to ask for a little support. Please subscribe, leave a like, and if you do, let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. These may seem like small gestures, but they're essential for helping the channel grow and allowing me to keep bringing you these stories every night. Now, lower the volume just a bit. Get comfortable, turn off the lights, and let's dive together into tonight's first story. Story 1. The line between the dream and the waking world has always been, for me, a distinct and solid thing. One state was the soft, illogical tapestry of the night, woven with threads of forgotten anxieties and impossible geographies. The other was the hard, sun-washed reality of Blackwater Estate, with its predictable rhythms and the ever-present whisper of the pines. But that summer, the summer Audrey came, the boundary began to blur. It was not a sudden rupture, but a slow, insidious seepage, like ink bleeding into clean water, until I could no longer tell which was the dream and which was the dreadful, waking truth. I was 20 then, and the world was a distant rumor. My life was the estate, a vast and crumbling kingdom of gables and shadow presided over by my brother, Dustin. He was a good man, Dustin, solid as the old oak that grew by the gate, but he carried the weight of our family's fated fortunes like a physical yoke. He was my guardian, my protector, my entire world, and his love was a smothering, careful thing. He kept the newspapers from me, turned away visitors, and spoke of the outside as a place of contagion and chaos. I suppose he thought he was keeping me safe, preserving some fragile part of me he believed the world would break. In doing so, he made me a perfect vessel for a different kind of breaking altogether. She arrived on an evening when the sky was the color of a fresh bruise, the air thick with the promise of a storm. There was no carriage, no announcement. One moment the long gravel drive was empty, and the next she was just there, standing before the great oak door as if she had grown from the shadows themselves. Dustin was away in the village, and so it was I who opened the door to her. She was drenched, her dark hair plastered to her pale neck, her clothes simple but elegant, though they were ruined by the mud and the rain. But it was her eyes that held me. They were the color of twilight, and they seemed to swallow the fading light from the hall, reflecting nothing back. "I seek shelter," she said, and her voice was a low, melodic hum that vibrated in the marrow of my bones. It was not a request. It was a statement of fact, as inevitable as the turning of the tide. I let her in. Of course I let her in. Her name was Audrey, she said. Her carriage had lost a wheel miles back, on the old coastal road. She offered no surname, no point of origin, no destination. It seemed at the time a reasonable mystery. The storm provided all the explanation we needed. Dustin returned later, his brow furrowed with the day's worries, and he was wary. He questioned her with a polite firmness, but Audrey's answers were like smoke. She was calm, poised, and her gaze seemed to soothe the very air around her. By the time we retired, Dustin's suspicions had been lulled, not dispelled, but buried under a layer of weary resignation. She would stay until the road was passable, he conceded. That was the first night the dreams changed. They were no longer my own. They were vivid, suffocating things. I dreamed of a deep, ancient cold, of a silence so profound it had a taste, like iron on the tongue. I had dreamed of a hunger that was not a hunger for food, but a yawning, cosmic emptiness. And through it all, I felt a presence, a consciousness that was vast and alien and terribly, intimately close. I would wake gasping, my skin clammy, the line between the dream and my sunlit room utterly dissolved. It seemed, perhaps, that the storm had agitated my humors. It was uncertain, Audrey stayed. The road, she reported each day, was still washed out. A bridge was down. There was always a reason. And with each passing day, the estate itself began to change. It was subtle at first. The flowers in the garden, usually so vibrant, began to look wan and listless, their petals drooping as if in grief. The air, even on the hottest days, carried a new subterranean chill, a dampness that clung to the curtains and the upholstery. I began to feel a constant, low thrum of exhaustion, a fatigue that sleep could not touch. I would wake more tired than when I lay down, my limbs heavy, my thoughts slow and syrupy. But in Audrey's presence, I felt a paradoxical vitality. She sought me out with an intensity that was both flattering and frightening. We would walk the overgrown paths of the garden, and she would speak of things I had only read about in the few books Dustin allowed. Cities of light, vast deserts, the myths of forgotten cultures. Her words painted pictures in my mind, brilliant and intoxicating. She listened to me as no one ever had, her whole being focused on my childish prattle, as if I were revealing the secrets of the universe. A bond formed between us, a silken cord that tightened with every shared glance, every whispered confidence. It felt like friendship, perhaps even like the beginnings of a love I had never known. But it was something else. It was a transfusion. She was filling me with wonder, and I was too naive to see that she was draining me in return. Dustin saw it. He saw the shadows under my eyes, the new pallor of my skin. "You look peaky, Julie," he'd say, his hand rough and warm on my forehead. "That woman, her presence agitates you." He began to press her more firmly about her plans for departure. Audrey would simply smile, a slow, languid curve of her lips that never reached her twilight eyes, and offer another plausible delay. The tension in the house thickened, a palpable thing you had to push through to move from room to room. Then the sickness began. It started with the animals. Old Thomas, the groundskeeper, found his favorite hound dead in its kennel. Not a mark on it, just empty. A week later, 2 of the dairy cows were found in a similar state, their bodies cold and their eyes glazed with a silent terror. A strange malaise settled over the household staff. Cook developed a persistent cough that rattled deep in her chest. The housemaids moved through their duties like sleepwalkers, their faces pale and drawn. The doctor from the village came and went, muttering about a miasma from the swamp, about a bad season for fevers. He prescribed tonics and rest, but the weakness clung to the house, a shroud we all wore. Only Audrey flourished. Her skin, pale before, now seemed to glow with a soft internal luminescence. Her movements became more fluid, more powerfully graceful. She rarely ate with us, claiming a delicate constitution, but I sometimes saw her in the garden at dusk, standing perfectly still, her face tilted to the sky as if drinking the fading light. The breaking point, or what we thought was the breaking point, came with the arrival of Ezra. He was a man from the Historical Society, a scholar with kind, curious eyes behind his spectacles, come to study our library's collection of local folk tales. He was an outsider, and his presence was a gust of fresh air in our stagnant house. He was skeptical of everything, especially the stories of miasma and sickness. He saw the state of the estate, the listless staff, my own fading health, and Dustin's grim, helpless anger. And he saw Audrey. He sought me out one afternoon in the library. I was trying to read, but the words swam on the page. "Miss Julie," he said, his voice low and earnest, "forgive my forwardness, but has anyone in your family ever suffered from a constitutional weakness? A susceptibility?" I shook my head. "No, we have always been strong. Until now." He glanced toward the door, ensuring we were alone. "And your guest, Miss Audrey, she seemed remarkably robust." A cold finger traced its way down my spine. The country air agrees with her, it seems. Does it? He asked softly. He leaned closer. I have been reading your family's papers. There are stories here. Old stories from the settlers who first came to this land. They spoke of things that lived in the deep woods, things that were old when the trees were saplings. They did not call them vampires, not with that word, but the descriptions. They are beings of consumption. They do not just drink blood, they consume essence, vitality, life itself. They cast a pall over the land, a spiritual frost. They grow strong while everything around them weakens and dies. And I felt a dizzying rush of fear and a strange, shameful sense of vindication. He was giving a name to this shapeless dread that had been coiling in my gut for weeks. That is just superstition, I whispered, but the words had no force. Is it? Ezra's gaze was unwavering. Look around you, Julie. The blighted garden, the sick animals, the ailing staff. Your own fading light. And she remains, unaging, unyielding, feeding on the very atmosphere of this place. On you. That night, the dream was not a dream at all. I woke, or I believe I woke to find myself standing at my bedroom window. The moon was full, a great silver coin in the sky. And below, in the garden, 2 figures stood, Audrey, and before her the young stable boy, Liam. He was staring into her eyes, his body slack, his face a mask of rapturous devotion. She leaned in, not to his neck, but to his lips. She did not bite him. She breathed in, a long, deep, shuddering inhalation. And I saw it. I saw a shimmering, silver mist leave his mouth and enter hers. His knees buckled, and she caught him, lowering him gently to the grass, before turning and looking directly up at my window. She smiled, and in the moonlight, her teeth seemed too sharp, her eyes 2 pools of absolute, starless night. The revelation was not a shock, but a final, terrible click. The last piece of a puzzle I had been unwilling to solve. This was the hidden force. This was the true nature of the bond we shared. I was not her friend. I was her larder. I was her chosen, her long-term project. She was not just taking my blood. She was consuming my future, my potential, my very self, sip by slow, intimate sip. I told Dustin and Ezra everything the next morning. The confrontation was swift and terrible. We found her in the east parlor, calmly reading a book of poetry. Dustin, armed with his grandfather's revolver, ordered her to leave. Ezra stood beside him, holding a small silver crucifix he had found among the artifacts in the library. Audrey closed her book with a soft sigh. She looked at each of us in turn, and her gaze held no fear, only a profound and ancient pity. "You misunderstand," she said, her voice still that hypnotic hum. "You think this is an invasion. It is not. It is a homecoming." She looked at me, and her eyes were full of a terrible love. "This land has always been hungry, Julie. Your family built this house on a mouth. You have felt it your whole life, that pull, that emptiness. I am not a parasite. I am its heart. I am what it feeds. And you are to be my vessel. The blurring was not an accident. It was a preparation. It was a preparation. The climax was not a battle. It was a sacrament." Dustin fired the gun. The report was deafening in the small room. The bullet struck her in the chest. She staggered back, a dark bloom appearing on her dress. But she did not fall. She looked down at the wound, then back at us, and smiled. The dark bloom shriveled and faded, leaving only unblemished cloth behind. Ezra rushed forward with the cross. She merely looked at it, and the silver seemed to grow dull, the wood to splinter and crack in his hand. "You see," she whispered, "this is not a story from your books. This is older than your God. older than your fear." She walked toward me. Dustin moved to block her, but it was as if he hit an invisible wall. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious, his life force flickering like a guttered candle. Ezra was next, falling to his knees, gasping for a breath that would not come. Then, she was before me. She cupped my face in her hands. Her touch was like ice and velvet. "The line is gone now, Julie," she whispered, her breath cold against my lips. "There is no more dream, no more waking. There is only us. There is only the hunger. Let me in." And I did. I felt my will, my resistance, my very self, dissolve. It was not a violation. It was an unlocking. The door I never knew was inside me swung open, and a cold, dark, glorious power flooded in. I felt the estate around me, felt every dying leaf, every sickened creature, every waning life. I felt their energy as a faint, warm current, and I understood how to pull it, how to taste it. I took a breath, and the last of Julie, the innocent girl, faded away like a forgotten sigh. The tension did not break. It loosened, its terrible grip gradually slackening, until it faded into a new and neutral reality. I live here still, at Blackwater. Dustin recovered, after a fashion. He tends the grounds, a quiet, hollow man. He looks at me sometimes, and a flicker of the old love and the old fear crosses his face before it is smoothed away by a force greater than himself. Ezra comes by once a season to leave his offerings of research and local history at the gate. He is our chronicler, our prophet. The villagers know to stay away. They speak of the pall over the estate, of the strange, beautiful women who live there, who never age, who are never seen in the day. Sometimes, on nights when the moon is hidden, we walk to the edge of the property, to the great iron gate. We stand there, Audrey and I, two shadows against a deeper dark. We look out at the distant lights of the village, at the warm, bustling lives being lived there. We do not hate them. We do not envy them. We simply watch. And we wait. The boundary is gone. There is only the long, quiet hunger and the slow, patient turning of the world, feeding us, season after season, forever. The hunger is a quiet companion. It does not rage or demand, but sits in the center of my being, a constant, low note that hums through the foundations of the house and the roots of the ancient oaks. It is no longer a separate thing, an affliction. It is me. I am its instrument, and it is my purpose. Dustin brought a new gardener from the village last week, a young man, strong and foolish, lured by wages no one else would offer. He lasted 3 days. On the 4th morning, I found him pruning the rose bushes, his hands trembling, his face the color of ash. He did not see me at first. I stood on the gravel path and watched him, this brief, bright spark of life intruding upon our perpetual twilight. He felt my presence and turned. His eyes, wide with a primal, uncomprehending terror, met mine. He did not see his employer's sister. He saw the stillness at the heart of the storm. He dropped his shears and ran, and I felt a small, faint warmth leave the ground where he had stood and flow into me. A petty sustenance, a passing taste. Audrey emerged from the house, a smile playing on her lips. "Wasteful," she murmured, her voice the sound of dry leaves skittering over stone. "But instructive. He will tell his stories. They will add to the legend. Fear keeps the curious away. It makes the offerings more potent. She is my teacher, my sister, my other self. We spend our nights in the library, but we do not read the books. We feel them. We feel the faint, lingering imprint of the hands that held them, the minds that were ignited by the words. It is a paler, more complex flavor than raw life force, like sipping wine from a bottle that has long been empty. Sometimes we walk the boundaries of the estate, and I learn to feel the subtle shifts in the land, the places where the veil between our world and the teeming, vibrant one outside is thinnest. We draw strength from the fear and reverence we inspire, a slow, steady drip that sustains us through the lean times. Dustin avoids me when he can. He tends to the practical matters of the estate with a grim, mechanical efficiency. This morning I saw him from my window, mending a section of the stone wall that had crumbled. His movements were slow, deliberate, devoid of the passion he once had for this land. He is a caretaker of a tomb, and he knows it. When our paths cross, he lowers his head. There is no anger left in him, only a deep, weary sorrow. He is the last relic of my old life, a ghost who has not yet realized he is dead. Last night, a traveler, lost and seeking directions, came to the gate. He was a middle-aged man, his face weathered by sun and worry. He called out, his voice cutting through the profound silence that envelops Blackwater. Audrey and I watched him from the porch, shrouded in shadow. He saw us, two pale forms in the darkness, and his words died in his throat. He stood there, frozen, caught between the fear of the unknown behind him and the palpable dread before him. I felt the hunger stir, not as a pang, but as a quiet acknowledgement. I took a single step forward, off the porch and onto the gravel. I did not speak. I did not need to. I simply looked at him, and in that look, I let him feel the immense, ancient emptiness that I have become. I saw the understanding dawn in his eyes, not of what I was, but of what he was in relation to me. Temporary, insignificant, sustenance. He stumbled backward, turned, and fled into the woods. I did not take him. It was not necessary. The terror he carried away was a richer, more lasting meal than his life would have been. It will linger in him, change him, and he will spread it wherever he goes. A seed of darkness that will eventually find its way back to us. This is our existence. We are the quiet at the end of the road. The chill in the summer air, the forgotten promise in an old story. The line is gone, and in its place is an endless, waking moment. The world turns, and its energy, its fear, its very life, flows inward toward Blackwater, toward us. We are patient. We have forever. And the hunger, our beautiful, silent hunger, is forever too. The seasons turned as they must, but their passage was a muted thing within the confines of the estate. Autumn did not bring a blaze of color, but a slow, sad browning, as if the leaves had simply given up. Winter was not a crisp, clean cold, but the deep, penetrating chill of a cellar that has never known the sun. The snow that fell seemed hesitant to land, and when it did, it lay in thin, gray sheets. I found myself drawn more and more to the old swamp, at the western edge of the property, the place where Audrey's car had first become stuck. It was the heart of it all, the source of the dampness that clung to our clothes and the silence that smothered our days. The water was black and perfectly still, a mirror reflecting nothing. Standing at its edge, I could feel the pull of the deep, cold mud, the vast, sleeping hunger that was the true master of this land. Audrey was its heart, and I was its will. We were the conduits through which it fed. One afternoon, I found Dustin there. He was standing a few yards from the water's edge, staring into its opaque depths, his shoulders slumped. He held a single, faded photograph in his hand. I did not need to see it to know it was a picture of us as children, from a time when the sun felt warm and the house held laughter. "You could leave," I said. My voice sounded alien to my own ears, a rustle of dead leaves. He didn't startle. He was long past that. He simply turned his head, his eyes meeting mine. They were the same eyes I had known my whole life, but the light behind them was guttering, a candle in a draught. "And go where, Julie?" he asked. The name was a relic, a shell he was addressing. "This is my home, my responsibility. You are my responsibility." "That girl is gone," I stated, the truth feeling neither cruel nor kind, merely factual. "I know." He looked back at the swamp. "But the shape of her remains, and a man must care for what is left, even if it is only a shape." He paused, his breath a faint plume in the chill air. "The new vicar came to see me. He spoke of prayers, of exorcism. A flicker of something that was not quite amusement stirred within me. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him the house was not haunted by a ghost," Dustin said, his voice flat. "It is haunted by its own nature. I told him to save his prayers for the living." He turned and walked away, back toward the hollow shell of the house, leaving me alone with the silent water. His loyalty was the final, most exquisite sustenance. He was feeding us with his enduring love, with his stubborn, broken heart. It was a richer, more complex flavor than any stranger's fear. That night, as Audrey and I stood on the porch, a new sensation pricked at the edges of my awareness. It was not fear, and it was not reverence. It was a sharp, bright point of determination. A light was moving at the edge of the woods, bobbing steadily closer. It was a lantern, and it was carried by a woman. She was old, her back bent, her steps slow but unwavering. She walked past the no trespassing sign Dustin had posted, as if it were not there, her gaze fixed on the house. She stopped at the foot of the porch steps and looked up at us. Her face was a web of wrinkles, but her eyes were clear and sharp, holding a knowledge that the vicar lacked. "I am Maeve," she said, her voice rough with age and disuse. "My grandmother told me stories of this place. She said a time would come when the quiet ones would wake fully." Audrey was still beside me, a statue of obsidian. "And you have come to what? Send us back to sleep?" she asked, her tone one of genuine curiosity. The old woman, Maeve, shook her head. "No, Knight, you cannot be unmade. The land chose you long before you were born." She lifted her lantern higher, its light a feeble challenge to the absolute dark that we carried. "I have come to make an offering, a pact. My time is short. My body is tired. Take me. But in return, you will spare my grandson. He is a restless boy. He will come seeking adventure. You will turn him away. You will let him live his little life." I felt the hunger shift its focus, contemplating this deliberate, willing sacrifice. It was a different kind of sustenance, laced with a selfless love that was both poignant and powerful. Audrey answered for us both. "We agree." Maeve nodded, as if concluding a business transaction. She set her lantern down on the gravel path, extinguishing its flame with a pinch of her fingers. Then she walked up the steps and stood before me. She did not look at Audrey. She looked only at me, and in her gaze, I saw no terror, only a profound and weary acceptance. "It is done," she whispered. I leaned forward and breathed in. Her life did not rush out in a panicked silver mist. It left her slowly, a deep, gold-tinged warmth that flowed into me like honey, carrying with it the memories of a long life, of children raised, of gardens tended, of losses endured. It was the most satisfying meal I had ever taken. She did not stumble or fall. She simply settled, her body becoming still and calm, a vacant house. We left her there on the porch, seated in a wicker chair looking for all the world like she was resting. In the morning, Dustin would find her and know what to do. He would bury her in the woods, another secret for the soil to keep. The pact was sealed. The boy would never know the price that was paid for his ordinary future. This is how our legend grows. Not just through fear, but through these quiet, desperate bargains. We are the keepers of the balance, the final arbiters. The hunger is not just a need. It is a covenant, and the world, in its endless, turning folly, will always provide. The boy never came. We felt his presence sometimes, a restless energy at the edge of the woods. But the promise we made to his grandmother was a chain he could not see, turning him away each time his curiosity grew too strong. He would shake his head, confused, and return to the village, to the warm, bustling life that was his inheritance. We kept our word. It is a small thing to keep a promise, but in an eternity of taking, such acts become precious. They are the only stones that do not erode. Dustin buried Maeve under the old willow tree. He said no words, but he placed a smooth gray stone from the creek at the head of the small mound. It was a gesture from the man he used to be, a final courtesy to the dead. He has begun to look like the land itself, his face etched with the same deep lines of erosion. His movements as slow and inevitable as the settling of the house. He is the last anchor to a world that is receding like a tide that will not return. The hunger has evolved. It no longer merely accepts what is offered, or what strays too close. It has begun to seek. I can sit in the east parlor, in the chair where Audrey once read her poetry, and cast my awareness out like a net. I can feel the lives in the village, each a tiny flickering flame. I can taste their joys and their sorrows, their petty angers and their quiet despairs. We do not take them, not yet, but we sample them, as one might taste the air before a storm. They are a tapestry of flavors, and we are learning the palate. Audrey watches me with a quiet pride. She says I am becoming what I was always meant to be. The vessel is no longer just a container. It is a tool, a weapon, a mouthpiece. Sometimes we speak of the past, not with nostalgia, but as historians reviewing old texts. She tells me of other places, other times, where the same arrangement existed between a place of power and its guardians. We are not unique. We are a pattern, a recurring symptom of the world's deep, geological hunger. Last night, a storm rolled in from the north. It was a violent, shrieking thing, the kind that would have sent the old Julie hiding under her blankets. Now, Audrey and I stood on the porch and welcomed it. The wind did not touch us. The rain curved around the house in a great, invisible arc de yard. We felt the raw power of the air, the crackling energy of the lightning, and we drew it in. It was a wild electric feast, a change from the slow, steady diet of fear and sacrifice. For a few hours, the estate felt alive, not with the life of growing things, but with a terrible, magnificent potency. When the storm passed, the silence that returned was deeper and more absolute than before. The air was cleansed of everything but our presence. Dustin emerged at dawn to assess the damage. There was none. The estate was pristine, untouched. He looked up at my window where I stood watching him. For a single, unguarded moment, his face was not weary or sorrowful, but awestruck. He saw the sheer, impossible power that now preserved this prison, and in that awe, I felt a new kind of sustenance, clean and cold and strong. This is our dominion. We are the stillness after the storm. We are the reason the shadows gather. The world outside continues its frantic dance, but it is a dance that happens on the periphery of our vision. Our reality is here, in the quiet, in the dark, in the patient, endless turning of the wheel. The hunger is the engine, and we are its quiet, eternal keepers. The years, if they can still be called that, have begun to fold into one another like layers of sedimentary rock. The village has a new name now. I heard Ezra whisper it once to Dustin at the gate. It means nothing to me. The people are the same in their essentials. Their brief, bright lives flaring up and guttering out in the same patterns of hope and disappointment. We are a constant in their folklore. A cautionary tale told to children who no longer believe in the dark corners of the world. Their skepticism is a piquant spice. Dustin is gone. One morning, I simply felt a small, steady light I had known my whole life wink out. He was in the vegetable garden, on his knees, weeding a patch of earth that had not yielded a single edible thing in decades. He just settled forward, his face in the soil, as if finally listening to a secret it had been telling him for years. We buried him next to Maeve under the willow. Audrey stood with me, a cool, silent presence. I felt nothing resembling grief, only a quiet sense of order. He had served his purpose completely. The last tether was severed. Without him, the practicalities of the estate ceased. The fences sagged. The garden was swallowed by wild, thorny things that even we would not approach. The house itself seemed to sigh and settle deeper into the earth, its windows becoming sightless eyes. We did not mind. It was becoming a more perfect reflection of us. Ezra still comes. He is an old man, his back bent like a question mark. He no longer brings books or papers. He simply stands at the gate, his milky eyes turned toward the house, and he speaks. He tells us the news of the outside world, of wars in distant countries and machines that fly through the air. He speaks of the village's slow death, of the young people leaving for the cities, of the old ways being forgotten. He's not talking to us, not really. He is praying. We are his congregation, his dark saints. We accept his words as our due, and when he leaves, he seems a little stronger, his step a little firmer. He feeds us with his faith, and we, in turn, sustain him. It is a perfect symbiosis. The hunger has become a form of perception. I no longer need to cast my awareness out. It is simply there, a field of which I am the center. I know when a fox dies in the woods, and I taste its final, frantic heartbeat. I feel the slow, patient growth of the lichen on the north side of the house. I am aware of the roots of the great oaks, drinking deep from the hidden waters that run beneath the swamp. Everything that happens on this land is a note in a silent song that only Audrey and I can hear. We have begun to change in ways that are not physical. We speak less and less. Our communication is a transfer of pure understanding, a sharing of the sustenance we gather. We are two pillars holding up the same ancient roof. Sometimes on windless nights, the house itself seems to breathe with us. The floorboards creak in a rhythm that matches the slow pulse of our existence. We are not just in Blackwater. We are becoming Blackwater. Last evening, a group of young men from the new town, fueled by drink and bravado, came to the gate. They carried bright lights that cut jagged wounds in the darkness. They shouted challenges, their voices thin and reedy against the immense silence. They dared the witches to show themselves. Audrey looked at me, and I felt her intention, cool and sharp as a shard of ice. We did not go to the gate. We simply let the silence answer them. We let the pressure of the land, the weight of centuries, press down upon their fragile minds. One by one, their shouts died. Their laughter turned to nervous whispers, then to choked fear. The lights in their hands flickered and died, not from a failure of batteries, but from a failure of will. They fled, but not before each of them had left a piece of their courage behind, a rich, metallic flavor on the air. We are the quiet. We are the ending. The world may forget the old stories. It may pave over the old paths, but it cannot erase the truth we represent. We are the destination. All things eventually flow toward stillness, toward decay, toward the final satisfying peace of being consumed. The hunger is the universe's only true constant, and we are its patient, willing heart. The taste of their fear was a fleeting thing, a sharp, bright spark that faded quickly into the vast reservoir of our stillness. It was a reminder that the world outside still possessed the capacity to remember, in its dim, instinctual way, what we are. But such direct confrontations are rare now. The land does our work for us. The very air around Blackwater has grown thick, resistant. Planes do not fly overhead. The signals from the phones and the radios of the few who venture near become garbled and die. We are a dead zone in the living world, a bubble of pristine silence. Audrey has begun to spend her days at the edge of the swamp. She stands so still that the water striders skate over the surface of her reflected form as if it were stone. She is listening to something I cannot yet hear, a deeper frequency. The mud there has begun to show a new property. Small things that fall into it, a leaf, a twig, a bird that flies too low, are not simply submerged. They are absorbed, leaving no ripple, as if the swamp is not water and earth, but a slow, viscous mouth. I see her smile sometimes, a subtle, contented curve of her lips when this happens. She is teaching it, or perhaps it is teaching her. I remain mostly in the house. My form feels less and less distinct from the worn floorboards and the dusty velvet drapes. I am a concentration of intent within the structure. From here, I can feel the roots of the willow tree, where Dustin and Maeve are buried. Feel them intertwining with their quiet remains, drawing them deeper into the earth, making them truly a part of the land. There is no more distinction between the dead and the estate. They are one and the same. Ezra has not come this week. The thread of his faith, which has sustained us for so long, has finally snapped. I felt it go, a fine wire breaking in the wind. He has joined the others in the soil. His prayers are over. A new sensation is beginning to prickle at the edge of my awareness. It is not a person, nor an animal. It's a vibration. A low, grinding hum that comes from the east. It is the sound of machines, distant, but persistent. They are cutting down the woods, the ancient, protective buffer that has shielded us for centuries. They are building, expanding their new town with its bright, meaningless lights. They do not know we are here. They do not believe in us. They believe in concrete and steel. Audrey turns her head from the swamp and looks toward me. The walls and distance separate us. Her thought reaches me, clear and calm. Let them come. The hunger shifts within me, not in alarm, but in anticipation. It has been a long time since we have had a proper feast. The slow, steady diet of silence and decay has been sufficient, but this is different. This is a challenge. This is the world not stumbling into our domain, but actively seeking to erase it. They will not succeed. They will bring their noise and their arrogance, and we will show them the true meaning of quiet. We will show them the depth of the hunger that lives in this earth. Their machines will fall silent. Their lights will go out. Their hearts will falter. They think they are building a future. They are only building a larger offering. The covenant remains. The world provides, and we are forever. The grinding hum is a constant now, a dissonant chord played against the symphony of our silence. It is the sound of the future, and it is tasteless. Audrey has returned from the swamp. She stands beside me in the parlor, her form seeming to draw the remaining light from the room. We do not need to watch from the windows. We feel the vibration through the soles of our feet, a tremor that is an affront. They are closer today. The scent of diesel fuel and crushed pine needles is a crude perfume on the air. We can taste the minds of the men operating the machines, a bland mixture of boredom, ambition, and a faint, unacknowledged unease. They laugh too loudly. They make jokes about ghosts. Their disbelief is a shield, but it is made of paper. Tonight, we will not wait for them to reach the gate. The estate must defend itself, and we are the estate. As the sun bleeds out behind the ragged tree line, we begin to walk. Our feet make no sound on the leaf litter. The woods, our woods, are tense around us. The usual night sounds are absent. The creatures have hidden themselves, sensing a shift in the ancient order. We stop at the new boundary. A raw, muddy scar cuts through the forest. Trees lie fallen, their torn roots exposed to the twilight. Beyond the scar, the yellow eyes of bulldozers and excavators wait for the morning. The air here is thin, violated. Audrey kneels and places her palm flat on the wounded earth. I do the same. We are not drawing power. We are releasing it. We are reminding the land of what it is and what we are. The hunger uncoils from us, a vast and invisible tide, and pours into the soil. It begins subtly. A mechanic sleeping in his truck wakes choking on a nightmare of suffocating earth. He abandons his post, babbling about the ground breathing. Then, the machines themselves begin to fail. A crawler track snaps for no reason. An engine coughs and dies, and will not restart. Tools go missing, only to be found later, rusted and brittle as old bones. By the third night, the unease has curdled into fear. The men huddle around their portable lights, which now flicker and dim, as if starved. They feel watched. They feel judged. They are. We stand, just beyond the ring of their feeble light, letting them feel the pressure of our gaze, the immense, patient weight of our presence. One of them, a young man with a kind face, looks directly into the darkness where I stand. He does not see me, but he sees something. His eyes widen, and he makes a sign his grandmother taught him. A futile gesture against a force that is older than symbols. He leaves the next morning. He tells his foreman he is sick, but the truth is in his eyes. He has seen the quiet, and it has seen him. He is the first to break. He will not be the last. The work has stalled. The scar in the earth remains, but it goes no deeper. The men are demoralized, their will eroded. They are not feeding us with their fear, not in the way Maeve did. This is different. This is a reclamation. We are not taking their lives. We are taking their purpose. We are turning their ambition back on itself, proving its emptiness. They will leave. They will tell stories of bad luck, of cursed ground, of investments that are not worth the cost. The forest will slowly heal the scar. The silence will return, deeper and more profound for having been challenged. We turn our backs on the machines and walk into the woods. The shadows welcome us, flowing around our forms like water. The hunger is satisfied for now. It has defended its own. We have defended our own. The covenant is not just about sustenance. It is about territory. This land is ours. It has always been ours. And we will endure long after their machines are dust and their names are forgotten. Story 2. The smell arrived in Stillwater on a Tuesday like any other, which is to say it was a day of quiet industry and predictable shadows. It began not as a thing one noticed, but as a thing one simply knew. The way you know you are dreaming without opening your eyes. It was the scent of old paper, of leather worn soft by countless hands, of dust motes dancing in sunbeams that had fallen in libraries a century ago. And beneath that, a faint, almost imperceptible sweetness, like dried roses pressed between the pages of a forgotten love letter. It was a smell that did not belong on Main Street, a street that knew only the sharp tang of coffee from the daily grind, the greasy perfume from Frankie's diner, and the clean, chemical smell of fresh-cut grass from the park. The source of the smell was a shop. It stood between the post office and the hardware store, two establishments of such solid and unassuming reality that the shop's sudden presence seemed less an intrusion and more a quiet correction, as if it had always been there and the town had simply failed to notice. The windows were dark, clean but impenetrable. The door was heavy oak, unmarked by any name or number. The only indication of its purpose was a single, elegantly scripted word painted in a deep, wine-dark red on the glass transom above the door. Aperto. Jasper Ray Simmons, the town's sole sheriff, noticed it on his morning rounds. He was a man built for calm, his movements slow and considered, his voice a low, steady rumble. He stood before the shop for a long time, his thumbs hooked into his belt, his hat shading his eyes. The smell of old books and roses was strongest here, a physical presence that seemed to push gently against the morning air. He tried the door. It was locked. He cupped his hands against the glass and peered inside, but saw only deeper darkness, a velvety nothingness that swallowed the light. It made the back of his neck prickle, a sensation he hadn't felt since he was a boy and had gotten lost in the woods behind his grandfather's farm. He made a note in his little book, a habit more than a necessity. New shop, aperto. Investigate. The shop opened the next day. The first to enter was Mary Ann Plitt, the librarian, a woman whose life was a monument to quiet order. She was drawn by the smell, a siren call to her very soul. The inside of Aperto was a cavern of wonders. It was larger than the exterior suggested, impossibly so, the walls receding into shadow. Countless shelves stretched away into infinity, stacked not with books, but with objects. A pocket watch that ticked backwards, a doll with eyes of sea glass, a spool of thread that shimmered like moonlight. The air hummed, a low, resonant frequency that vibrated in the fillings of her teeth. And there was the shopkeeper. He introduced himself as Desmond. He was a man of no particular age, his features pleasant but unmemorable, as if he had been sketched in soft charcoal. His eyes, however, were the color of a winter sky just before snow, and they held a depth that was both calming and profoundly unsettling. He did not ask Mary Ann what she wanted. He simply smiled, a gentle, knowing curve of his lips, and said, "For you, I think it is this." He led her to a small glass-topped case. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, lay a single, perfect fountain pen. It was carved from a dark, smoky wood, and its nib was gold. It was without question the most beautiful thing Mary Ann had ever seen. It was the pen she had dreamed of owning as a young girl. The pen that would write the stories she had locked inside her for 60 years. "It is a conduit," Desmond said, his voice a soft murmur. "It does not create, but it reveals what is already there, waiting to be born." Mary Ann's hand trembled as she reached for it. "How much?" she whispered. Desmond's smile widened. "Just a fraction. The price is always the same, a trifle. Something you will not miss." She bought the pen. She paid with the memory of her 7th birthday. The one with the strawberry cake and the pony ride. It seemed a fair trade, a dusty, faded recollection for this instrument of pure potential. That night she sat at her desk, the pen in her hand, and she wrote. Words flowed from her, a torrent of prose, so beautiful it made her weep. She wrote of a love she had never known, of landscapes she had never seen, of a life lived in full, vibrant color. She filled page after page, lost in the ecstasy of creation. She did not notice, as she wrote, that the photographs on her mantelpiece were slowly fading. The images of her parents, her sister, her own younger self, dissolving into blank, cream-colored paper. She was trading her past for a future of words. She did not miss it. Not at all. The next was Bobby Corrigan, the high school quarterback, whose throwing arm had been shattered in a car crash that spring, ending his dreams of a scholarship. He went into Aperto sullen and broken. He came out with a smooth gray stone that fit perfectly in his palm. "Keep it close," Desmond had told him. "It will absorb your weakness." Bobby put the stone in his pocket. The next day at practice, his arm was stronger than ever, his throws laser-guided miracles. The stone in his pocket grew warm, then hot, and slowly, over the days, it began to crumble, turning to a fine black grit. Bobby's father, a kind, simple man who had spent nights massaging his son's atrophied shoulder, suddenly found his own arms growing frail, his hands shaking so badly he could no longer hold his tools at the auto shop. He lost his job. Bobby, drunk on his own restored glory, barely noticed. The town began to change. It was a subtle poison, administered in perfect, personalized doses. Old Mrs. Higgins, who had always wanted a garden to rival the one in the painting that had hung over her fireplace for 50 years, received a packet of seeds from Desmond. They bloomed into flowers of such unearthly beauty, colors that had no name, that people would stop their cars to stare. But the flowers had no scent, and the soil around them turned a dead, ashen gray, and the family of robins that nested in her eaves fell from their nest. Lifeless, their tiny hearts simply stopped. The beauty of the garden was a vacuum, consuming the life around it to sustain itself. Jasper Ray watched it all from the driver's seat of his patrol car. He saw the new, hard light in people's eyes. He saw the quickening pace, the furtive glances, the way conversations died when he approached. The smell of apero, that beguiling scent of old knowledge and dead flowers, now seemed to cling to the very bricks of the buildings, to the leaves on the trees. It was the smell of desire, and it was making his town sick. He confronted Desmond one evening as the shopkeeper was locking up. The street was empty, the sunset bleeding orange and purple across the sky. "This needs to stop," Jasper Ray said, his voice low and hard. Desmond turned, his key in the lock. His winter sky eyes were placid. "Stop what, Sheriff? Commerce? The fulfillment of dreams? I am merely a facilitator." "You're selling them poison," Jasper Ray said. "They're paying for these trinkets with pieces of themselves, with pieces of each other." "Is that what you see?" Desmond asked, his head tilted. "I see them trading what they do not value for what they desire above all else. Is that not the oldest story of all? Marianne traded dusty memories for a legacy. Bobby traded a father's strength for his own glory. Mrs. Higgins traded a few common songbirds for a slice of paradise. The balance is always maintained. The ledger is always clean. The ledger is owed." "There's no balance," Jasper Ray growled, stepping closer. "There's only you taking." Desmond's smile was a cold, thin thing. "I take nothing that is not freely given. The cost is always stated. They simply do not listen. They hear only the song of their own wanting. Your town was already hollow, Sheriff. I have merely given the emptiness a shape." "I can't know." Jasper Ray felt a cold dread settle in his gut. He thought of his own secret desire, the one he had never spoken aloud, the one that had festered in him since his wife, Ilara, had walked out 10 years ago, leaving only a note on the kitchen table. The desire to not feel the ache of her absence every single morning when he woke up. He knew, with a terrifying certainty, that if he walked into that shop, Desmond would have something for him. A trinket, a trifle, a way to make the pain go away. He did not go in. He turned and walked away, the smell of roses and dust clinging to his clothes like a curse. The violence began quietly. A shouting match between Bobby Corrigan and his father escalated into a shoving match, and then the old man was on the floor, his head striking the corner of the hearth, and he did not get up. The town, already frayed, began to tear. A dispute over a property line turned into a fistfight. The Henderson boy, who had gotten a set of paints from Desmond that could capture the very soul of a subject, was found trying to paint his sleeping sister, and the portrait that emerged was a twisted, screaming thing that aged and rotted in its frame over the course of a single night. Jasper Ray could no longer maintain order. The town was a pot coming to a boil, and he was just a man with a lid. He knew there was only one way to end it. He had to go to the source. He found Marianne Plitt in the library, which was now filled with stacks of her magnificent handwritten manuscripts. She was a wraith, her eyes burning with a feverish light, her fingers stained with ink. The photographs in her purse were all blank. "Marianne," he said softly, "the pen, you have to give it back." She clutched it to her chest. "No, it's mine. It's the only thing that's ever been truly mine. It's killing you. It's killing the town." "The town?" She laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "The town is just a setting. This is the story." He left her there, scribbling furiously, trading the last of her memories for one more perfect sentence. He walked to Aperto. The door was unlocked. The interior was darker than he remembered, the hum more intense, a pressure in his skull. Desmond stood in the center of the room, waiting for him. "Sheriff Jasper Ray," he said, "I wondered when you would come for your heart's desire." "I don't want anything from you," Jasper Ray said, though the lie tasted like ash in his mouth. "Everyone does," Desmond replied, stepping closer. "It is the human condition. You wish to be free of the weight of Ilara, the constant, gnawing absence. I can take it. All of it. The memory of the smell of her hair, the sound of her laughter in the next room, the way her hand felt in yours. I can make it so that it never hurt at all. The price is small. A trifle. It can be so." Jasper Ray felt the offer wrap around him, seductive and warm. It would be so easy to let go of the pain, to be light again. "What trifle?" he whispered, his resolve crumbling. Desmond's eyes gleamed. "Your sense of duty. The part of you that feels responsible for this town. It is a heavy burden, is it not? Let me have it. You will be free of her, and free of them. You can leave this place and never look back." Jasper Ray stood at the precipice. He could feel the warmth of the shop, the comforting smell of roses and old paper, the promise of oblivion. He thought of Ilara's face, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. And the pain was so sharp, it was a physical wound. And then he thought of Bobby Corrigan's father, lying dead on the floor. He thought of the blank photographs in Mariana's purse. He thought of the dead birds in Mrs. Higgins' garden. He took a step back. "No," he said, the word tearing itself from his throat. "The pain is mine. It's part of me. You can't have it." Something in Desmond's pleasant mask slipped. For a fraction of a second, Jasper Ray saw not a man, but a vast, hungry emptiness, a thing that fed on the fractures of the human heart. "Then you will die with it," Desmond hissed, his voice no longer a murmur but the rustle of 1,000 dry leaves. The shop began to change. The shelves melted away, the objects upon them dissolving into smoke. The walls receded, revealing not the buildings of Main Street, but a starless, infinite black. They were not in a shop anymore. They were nowhere. The only light came from Desmond, who was now growing, unfolding, his human shape dissolving into a column of swirling, insubstantial gray. The smell of roses and old paper became the smell of the void, of cosmic dust and absolute zero. Jasper Ray did not run. He stood his ground, a solitary man in a universe of nothing. He understood now. Aperto was not a shop. It was a mouth. Desmond was not a man. He was a hunger, and Stillwater was just a meal. He closed his eyes and thought of Ilara, not of her leaving, but of a morning in summer years ago when the light was golden, and she was laughing, and the world was whole. He held on to that memory, the pain and the joy of it intertwined, the weight of it, the truth of it. It was his. It was real. The grayness rushed towards him. When Jasper Ray opened his eyes, he was standing on Main Street. The sun was shining. The shop, Aperto, was gone. In its place was a vacant lot, overgrown with weeds. The smell was gone. The town was quiet, but it was a dead quiet, a hollow quiet. He saw people moving behind windows, their faces slack, their eyes empty. They had gotten what they wanted, and in doing so they had lost what made them whole. They were still breathing, but the town of Stillwater was gone, its soul consumed. Jasper Ray walked back to his office, the memory of Ilara a solid, aching weight in his chest. It was all he had left. It was everything. And in the quiet of the vacant lot, a whisper began. A whisper that was not a sound, but a seed planted deep in the earth. A promise waiting for the next town, the next collection of hungry hearts. For the shop is never closed. For the shop is always waiting. For the shop is always open. For the shop is always open. For the shop is always open. He sat at his desk for a long time, the silence of the office a physical presence. The phone did not ring. No one came by with a complaint or a friendly greeting. The town of Stillwater had achieved a kind of peace, the peace of a grave. He thought about getting in his car and driving. Just driving until the memory of this place faded in his rearview mirror. But Desmond's offer echoed in his mind. To leave would be to accept it, to trade his duty for his own peace. He could not do it. The weight was his to carry. Days bled into weeks. The changes in the town became the new normal. Marianne Plitt was found one morning at her library desk, her head resting on a stack of pristine, beautiful pages, the fountain pen dry in her hand. She was gone, and the stories she had written, when read by anyone else, were just gibberish, elegant nonsense. Bobby Corrigan left for college on a full scholarship, his arm a legend. No one saw him help his mother pack, or noticed the way she flinched when he came near. Mrs. Higgins' garden continued to bloom with impossible colors, a stark, beautiful scar on the town. Children did not play near it. Jasper Ray made his rounds. He was a ghost haunting a dead town. He would nod to people, and they would nod back, their eyes sliding away from his, as if they shared a shame they could not name. They had all visited the shop. They had all made their trades. They had all gotten exactly what they wanted, and the emptiness it left behind was a secret they kept from themselves. It was on a Tuesday, exactly 1 month after Aperto had vanished, that the news smell arrived. Jasper Ray was walking past the vacant lot, as he did every day, a ritual of remembrance and defiance. He stopped. He sniffed the air. It was faint, almost undetectable beneath the scent of damp earth and weeds. It was the smell of ozone like the air after a lightning strike, and beneath it, the rich, intoxicating aroma of dark chocolate and espresso. He looked at the vacant lot. A dandelion had pushed through a crack in the pavement, its yellow head bright in the sun. As he watched, the flower seemed to shimmer, its color deepening, intensifying, before it withered and turned to dust in the space of a single breath. The ground beneath it was not just barren, it was blackened, as if scorched. A cold certainty settled over him. It was not over. The hunger had not been sated, only paused. It was tasting the air again, testing the waters of this new emptiness, this fresh despair. It was preparing its next menu. He thought of the whisper in the lot, the seed planted deep. It was germinating. The shop was not a place, it was a cycle. And the people of Stillwater, hollowed out and ripe for a new kind of wanting, would be the perfect customers. They would no longer trade memories or the strength of others. They would trade the only thing they had left, the silence where their hearts used to be. They would trade their numbness for feeling, any feeling, even if it was pain, because even pain was better than the void they now inhabited. Jasper Ray turned from the lot and walked towards the town hall. His steps were slow, heavy, but they were deliberate. He could not fight the shop. He could not kill the hunger. But he could bear witness. He could remember the cost. He could be the one man in town who still felt the weight of what was lost. And when the new door opened, when the new sign appeared, he would be there. He would stand in front of it, a solitary sheriff in a town that no longer needed one. And he would tell the story to anyone who would listen. A story of a Tuesday and a smell and the price of a dream. It was a small, futile thing, but it was his. It was all he had left to give. He reached the worn wooden steps of the town hall, his hand pausing on the rusted railing. The building seemed smaller now, a relic from a time when governance mattered. Inside, the air was thick with dust and resignation. Mabel, the town clerk, looked up from her crossword puzzle. Her eyes, once bright with gossip and gentle curiosity, were flat and dull. "Morning, Sheriff," she said, her voice devoid of its usual lilt. "Mabel." He nodded, his gaze sweeping over the silent, empty chairs in the waiting area. "Anything to report?" "Report?" She almost smiled. "A brittle, broken thing?" "No, Sheriff. Nothing to report. Nothing at all." "Yeah." He continued to his office, the click of the door closing behind him echoing in the profound quiet. He sat down, the old leather chair groaning under his weight. He opened a drawer and took out a blank incident report form. He picked up a pen, a cheap plastic ballpoint, and stared at the empty lines. He began to write. He did not write a report. He wrote an account. He started with Marianne Plitt and her fountain pen. He wrote about the fading photographs and the beautiful, meaningless words. He wrote about Bobby Corrigan and the warm, crumbling stone, and his father's broken body on the hearth. He wrote about Mrs. Higgins' silent, deadly garden. He wrote about the smell of roses and dust, and the man with the winter sky eyes. His hand cramped, but he did not stop. He filled one page, then another. He was not writing for an official record. He was writing a testament. He was building a dam against the coming silence, with the only bricks he had left, words and memory. The pain of Ilara was a sharp, familiar companion as he wrote, a reminder of what real feeling cost, a counterpoint to the hollow peace that had suffocated the town. When he finished, he made a copy on the old, whirring machine in the hall. He folded the original and locked it in his desk drawer. The copy he placed in a plain manila envelope. He walked back out into the afternoon sun, the envelope feeling heavy in his hand, a single page containing the ghost of an entire town. He went to the post office. The line was short, moving with a listless, mechanical efficiency. He bought a stamp and mailed the envelope to no one. He addressed it to a vacant lot in a city he had never visited, a random act of sending a message into the void, a prayer against the inevitable. As he walked back towards his office, he saw a small crowd gathering at the edge of the vacant lot. His heart seized. He quickened his pace. They were not talking, just standing and staring at the patch of blackened earth where the dandelion had died. The air was thick with the new smell, the ozone and the dark chocolate, a scent that promised warmth and energy and life to people who had none. A young woman, Lena from the diner, reached out a tentative hand towards the blackened soil. Jasper Ray saw a flicker in her dead eyes, a spark of something, not hope, but want. A deep, primal want for anything other than this nothingness. "Don't," Jasper Ray said, his voice cutting through the quiet. She flinched, pulling her hand back as if burned. The others turned to look at him, their expressions a uniform mask of vague resentment. He was a reminder. He was the stone in their shoe, the splinter in their mind. "It's just dirt, Sheriff," someone mumbled. But it wasn't. They could all feel it. The promise was coalescing, drawing power from their collective emptiness. The shop was not just coming back. It was being rebuilt from the inside out, its foundation laid in the hollow spaces it had created. Jasper Ray stood before them, a tired man with a story in his desk drawer and an ache in his heart. He had no power to stop what was coming. He could only stand and watch and remember. He would be the lone tree in a field of dust, a landmark for a world that was already gone, waiting for the next wind to blow. The crowd dispersed, melting away from the lot and from him, leaving Jasper Ray alone with the fertile darkness. He knew then that his vigil had truly begun. It was not a battle he could win with a badge or a gun, but a war of attrition fought in the quiet spaces of the human heart. He walked back to his office, the envelope he had mailed feeling like the most futile gesture in the world. Yet it was the only one he had. That night, he dreamed of Alara. It was not a memory, but a distortion. In the dream, she was in the shop, apropos, running her fingers over a silver locket. She turned to him, her eyes not the warm brown he remembered, but the placid winter sky blue of Desmond's. "It wouldn't hurt at all, Ray," she whispered, and her voice was the rustle of dry leaves. He woke with a start, the sheets damp with sweat, the phantom smell of chocolate and ozone clinging to the air in his small, dark bedroom. The next morning, the change was undeniable. A low, wrought iron fence had appeared around the vacant lot overnight, its spikes looking less like decoration and more like teeth. The blackened patch of earth had grown, and at its center, a single perfect shoot of green had emerged, a stem of such vibrant, impossible health that it seemed to suck the color from the surrounding weeds. People began to walk past the lot on their way to work, their steps slowing, their eyes lingering a little too long. The silence in the town was no longer just empty. It was expectant. Jasper Ray started visiting people. He went to Mrs. Higgins first. Her garden was a riot of color, a cacophony of perfumes that made him dizzy. She was sitting on her porch, staring at nothing. "Clara," he said, using her first name for the first time in 20 years. "That lot. You know what it is. You know what's coming." She looked at him, and for a moment, a flicker of the old, sharp-witted woman he knew was there. "I have my paradise, Jasper Ray. It's enough." "Is it?" he asked, gesturing to the unnaturally still and silent birds perched in the trees around her garden, their eyes like beads of glass. "You traded the songbirds for the flowers. What will you trade for the silence to feel like music again?" Her face crumpled, and she looked away back towards her vibrant, deadly flowers. He knew he had struck a nerve, but he didn't know if it would be enough. He found Bobby Corrigan's mother, Helen, packing a box in her son's old room. The room was a shrine to his baseball success, but the trophies were dusty. "Call sometimes," she said, not looking at Jasper Ray. "He sounds successful." "He traded his father's strength for his own," Jasper Ray said gently. "And now that strength is gone from this house? From you? What will you trade to feel strong again, Helen? To not feel so alone?" She froze, her hands gripping the folded jersey. A single tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. She did not answer. He was planting seeds of his own, seeds of doubt and memory, trying to grow a resistance in the barren soil of their souls. It felt like shouting into a gale. A week later, the foundation was laid. It was not brick or concrete, but a smooth, dark stone that seemed to absorb the sunlight. It appeared between dusk and dawn, as if it had risen from the earth itself. The smell was stronger now, a permanent fixture on that end of Main Street. People began to leave small, pathetic offerings by the iron fence. A faded ribbon, a dead flower, a child's drawing. They were drawn to it not with hope, but with a desperate, addictive need, like moths to a flame that had already burned them once. Jasper Ray stood watching from his office window, his hand resting on the locked drawer that held his testament. He knew what the final offering would be. It would not be a memory or a strength or a song. It would be the emptiness itself. They would line up to trade the void Desmond had created for a new, shinier distraction, a deeper oblivion, until there was nothing left of them at all. He saw Lena from the diner approach the fence. She held a small porcelain doll, its face cracked. She hesitated, looking up and down the deserted street, then pushed the doll through the iron bars. It landed on the dark stone with a soft click. The green chute at the center of the lot seemed to pulse with a faint emerald light. Lena let out a shuddering sigh, a mix of relief and profound loss, and hurried away. Jasper Ray closed his eyes. The war was lost. He was the last man standing in a conquered land. All he could do now was wait for the doors to open and be there to speak the truth, even if no one was left to listen. The story was all that remained. The following evening, a frame of dark, polished wood stood where the foundation had been, outlining a space that was not quite a door and not quite a window. Through it, Jasper Ray could see not the blackened earth of the lot, but a deep, inviting warmth, the suggestion of a room lit by lamplight. The shop was building itself from the inside out, using the longing of the town as its blueprint. He left his office and walked to the edge of the lot. The iron fence was cold under his fingers. He could hear it now. A low hum that was not a sound but a vibration in the teeth. A frequency tuned to a specific kind of ache. He looked at the people in their homes across the street. They stood at their windows, watching the progress, their faces pale and rapt. They were not being tricked. They were being called. He knew then that his written testament was not enough. A story locked in a drawer was a dead thing. It had to be spoken. It had to be heard. He turned his back on the nascent shop and walked to the center of town, to the small, neglected square with its dry fountain and its single weathered bench. He climbed onto the bench, his knees protesting, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He took a deep breath of the tainted air. "They took my wife's laughter," he shouted, his voice raw and unfamiliar in the stillness. Marianne Plitt traded the memory of her mother's voice for a pen that wrote lies. Curtain twitched in a nearby house. A face appeared, scowling. Bobby Corrigan sold his father's strength for a fastball. He left a ghost in his house and a broken woman holding his jersey. He saw Lena from the diner stop dead on the sidewalk, her hand flying to her mouth. "It's coming back," Jasper Ray yelled, sweeping his arm towards the lot. "It's not here to give you anything. It's here to take what's left. The silence, the numbness. It will take the nothing you feel and leave you with a deeper nothing. And you will thank it for the privilege." A few doors opened. People shuffled out onto their porches, their expressions a mixture of anger and a dawning, terrible recognition. He was tearing open the carefully stitched scar over their collective wound. "His name was Desmond. He smells like lies and dead flowers. He offers you a cure that is the disease. He is a hunger, and we are his food." A stone skittered on the pavement near his feet. He didn't flinch. He kept shouting, pouring out the story, naming the prices, describing the hollowed-out eyes of his neighbors. He was a prophet of the past, screaming a warning about a future that was already unfolding. The crowd that gathered was not a mob, but a collection of stunned and shamed ghosts. They listened, some with tears tracking through the dust on their faces, others with their fists clenched. He had forced them to remember the trade. He had forced them to feel the weight of the emptiness they carried. When his voice gave out, reduced to a pained whisper, he stopped. The square was utterly silent. The low hum from the vacant lot seemed to have receded, just a little. The people looked at one another, and for the first time in months, they saw not just neighbors, but fellow survivors of a catastrophe they had all willingly walked into. Jasper Ray stepped down from the bench, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had done it. He had planted his own seed, a seed of painful, ugly truth. He walked back towards his office, the crowd parting for him. No one spoke. No one thanked him. But as he passed, he saw Mrs. Higgins standing on her porch, and she was not looking at her garden, but at him. She gave a single, slow, almost imperceptible nod. He knew it wasn't over. The shop would still open. The hunger would still feed. But he had reminded them of the cost. He had given them a story to hold on to. A story of loss. A story that was real. It was a thin shield against the coming storm, but it was a shield. And for now, in the heavy, waiting silence of Stillwater, it was enough. He slept that night, a deep and dreamless sleep, for the first time since Alara. The act of shouting his story into the town's silence had been a purging, a terrible and necessary release. When he woke, the sun was high, and the air outside his window felt different. The scent of ozone and chocolate was still there, but it was fainter, pushed back by the ordinary smells of morning dew and brewing coffee. He dressed slowly and walked to the diner. The bell above the door jangled, a sound that had become rare. Lena was behind the counter, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. She looked at him, and for a second, he saw not the hollow waitress, but the young woman she had been before. "Coffee, Sheriff?" she asked, her voice hesitant. He nodded and took a seat at the counter. The usual silence was there, but it was a thoughtful one, not a dead one. A few other people were scattered in the booths. They didn't talk to each other, but they weren't staring blankly at the walls either. They were thinking. They were remembering his words. He saw Mrs. Higgins enter, her posture less rigid than before. She took a seat by the window and ordered tea. She didn't look at her garden, which was still unnaturally vibrant, but at the people passing by on the street. It was a small shift, a change in the current. The collective addictive want that had been feeding the lot had been fractured. The shop's return was not halted. He could feel its presence like a storm on the horizon. But it was no longer welcomed with open, empty arms. It was being met with a wary, bruised resistance. Days turned into a week. The dark wooden frame around the lot remained, a skeletal promise. But it advanced no further. The green shoot at its center grew no larger. The town existed in a state of suspended animation, caught between the memory of their loss and the dread of a new one. Jasper Ray continued his patrols, but he no longer visited people to warn them. They had heard the warning. Now, they had to live with it. He was in his office, reviewing his testament, when the door creaked open. It was Bobby Corrigan's mother, Helen. She stood in the doorway, wringing her hands. "Sheriff," she said, I got a letter from Bobby." Jasper Ray gestured for her to sit. "Is he all right?" "He's lost his pitching arm," she said, her voice trembling. "The doctors can't explain it. The strength is just gone. He's coming home." Jasper Ray felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The trades were not isolated events. They had consequences that rippled outwards, snapping back on themselves. Bobby's success, bought with his father's vitality, had been a loan, not a gift. And now the debt was due. "He'll need you, Helen," Jasper Ray said softly. She nodded, fresh tears in her eyes. "I know, but I'm so tired, Sheriff. I don't know if I have anything left to give." "You have more than you think," he said. "You have the truth. That's a different kind of strength." After she left, he looked out the window at the stubborn frame of the shop. It was waiting. It could wait for years, for decades, until the vigilance faded and the memory of the pain grew dimmer than the promise of relief. His victory was temporary. The hunger was eternal. But as he watched, he saw two figures stop in front of the iron fence. It was Lena and old Mr. Gable, the butcher. They weren't leaving an offering. They were just standing there, talking quietly. After a moment, they turned and walked away together, not looking back. Jasper Ray leaned back in his chair. The story was out. It was walking the streets of Stillwater now, a living thing. It was in Helen's tired eyes and in the quiet conversation by the fence. It was a fragile defense, a story against a force of nature. But it was their story. And for as long as they could tell it and remember it, the shop would remain just a frame. A door that could not open. A hunger kept at bay by the simple, painful act of remembering what it felt like to be full. The frame began to gather dust. It was a subtle thing at first, a fine gray film on the dark wood, but Jasper Ray noticed. He made a point of walking past the lot every day, and he saw the way the pollen from Mrs. Higgins' garden, no longer quite so unnaturally vibrant, settled on the wrought iron and the smooth stone foundation. The green shoot remained, a stubborn emerald tooth in the black earth. But it did not grow. The town did not heal. That was too grand a word for it. It scarred. The silence was still there, but it was no longer the silence of the grave. It was the quiet of a house after a great loss. A silence filled with the memory of sound. People began to talk to one another, not about the weather or the ball game, but in fragments, in hints. They spoke of missing things, of aches they couldn't name. They were comparing notes, using the story Jasper Ray had given them as a map to navigate their own emptiness. He found Lena sitting on the bench in the town square one afternoon, her uniform dress looking too big for her. She was staring at the dry fountain. "I gave it a doll," she said without looking at him. "My grandmother gave it to me. It was the only thing I had left of her voice. The way she'd sing to me." Jasper Ray sat down beside her. The wood of the bench was warm from the sun. "I know," he said. "I thought it would make the quiet stop," she whispered. "But it just made it louder. After I heard you shouting, I remembered the song. It's just a few notes. I can't remember all the words." "But you remember the feeling," Jasper Ray said. She nodded, a single tear escaping. "It hurts to remember." "It's supposed to," he replied. "That's how you know you're still here." He left her there with her fragmented song and her honest pain. This was the work now. Not a battle, but a long, slow convalescence. He was not a sheriff policing a town, but a keeper of a fragile peace, a warden of memory. Weeks bled into a month. Bobby Corrigan came home. He was a tall, broad-shouldered young man who moved with a startling fragility, his right arm hanging limp at his side. He and his mother were seen walking together in the evenings, not talking much, just being together. It was a sight that held its own kind of sorrow, but it was real. It was a weight they were learning to carry together. One evening, as Jasper Ray was locking up his office, he saw a flicker of movement from the lot. He turned, his hand instinctively going to the key in the lock. The dust on the dark wooden frame was stirring. It wasn't the wind. The air was perfectly still. The dust swirled, coalescing for a moment into a shape that was almost a face. A smooth, featureless oval with a hint of a smile. The low hum returned, a single questioning note that vibrated in the fillings of his teeth. From down the street, a child laughed. The sound was sharp and clear, a shard of genuine joy. The hum from the lot faltered. The dusty face dissolved, scattering back into a meaningless film. The silence that returned was the quiet of a sleeping town. Jasper Ray stood for a long time, watching the empty frame. The shop was not gone. It was patient. It was a vacuum, and nature abhorred it. One day the town would forget to remember. A new generation would grow up not knowing the cost, feeling only the inherited emptiness, and seeing only a beautiful, empty frame. The hunger would wait. He walked home under a sky full of stars, the ache in his heart a familiar, almost comfortable weight. He would not see the end of this story. His part was almost done, but he had given them a foundation of their own, built not from stone but from shared truth. It was crooked and it was cracked, but it was real. And for now, for this single quiet night in Stillwater, real was enough.